If I could ask everybody to be seated, we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Deborah Yedlin, and I have the pleasure of serving as the President and CEO of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you today as we host Canada's Minister of Finance and National Revenue, the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, for what promises to be an important and timely discussion about Budget 2025 and what it means for businesses across Canada. Bienvenue, Monsieur le Ministre Champagne. Nous sommes ravis de vous accueillir cet après-midi. As we get started, I want to acknowledge our immense privilege to live and work on Treaty 7 territory. The Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta is comprised of the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai nations, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney nations. Calgary is also home to Opetemsawak, Métis government, Districts 5 and 6, and to many urban Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. As we discuss the future of Canada's economy today, let this acknowledgement guide our conversation and remind us that true progress is rooted in partnership and inclusion of all communities. I'd like to take a moment to recognize some notable guests here this afternoon. The Honourable Lois Mitchell, 18th Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, Corey Hogan, Member of Parliament for Calgary Confederation, Court Ellingson, MLA for Calgary Foothills, Councillor Mike Jamieson, Calgary Councillor for Ward 12, as well as our Chamber Board members. Board Chair Jason Hatcher, Managing Principal of Navigator, Board Vice Chair Scott Wenger, Director of Government Relations at Suncor, Ian Anderson, Independent Executive Advisor, Spencer Forgo, Vice President Government Relations and Corporate Affairs, Brian Lanier, CEO of the Leaders Circle, Melinda Park, Regional Managing Partner, Borden Ladner Gervais, and Robert Savin, Managing Director and co-founder of Wealthbridge. Let's give everybody a round of applause for being here today. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for their generous support of today's event. Without your support, these kinds of events don't happen. Our presenting sponsor, Synovus, our thanking sponsor, Pathways Alliance, and our supporting sponsors, CAP, Imperial Oil, and National Bank. So Parliament launched its Budget 2025 last Tuesday, and it couldn't have come at a more significant time for Canada's economy. We've reached a turning point where businesses across sectors are navigating a rapidly changing global landscape, one shaped by tariffs, shifting trade dynamics, new technologies, and an urgent need to balance economic growth with environmental and social responsibility. Businesses of all sizes are struggling to access capital in Canada compared to global markets, a gap that is limiting our ability to compete on a global scale. From our position in Calgary, our economy is diversifying at a rapid rate as our population continues to grow, which presents both challenges and opportunities. We have a number of key sectors evolving and trying to keep pace with the shifting economic landscape. Energy remains foundational to our economy, and it's evolving rapidly, both in terms of innovation and technology and the composition of the sector. We have an emerging tech sector, which is very exciting, where startups and scale-ups are driving innovation and working to meet demands, but we need to support the scale-ups. And of course, transportation, logistics, and supply chains responding constantly to changing trade relations and interprovincial dynamics. Now more than ever, our business community is navigating global uncertainty, and they're looking for a vision and direction for the country that reflects a commitment to prosperity and economic strength. And we're pleased to see that Budget 2025 is taking steps to address many of the challenges Canadian businesses are facing. Many of the initiatives tabled have been championed by our business community here in Calgary, so it's a positive sign to see these interests reflected in the budget. We count. From clear indications that the emissions cap will not move forward, to improving tax competitiveness and investing in global market access and diversification, to investing in public and community infrastructure in Canadian cities, the budget is certainly comprehensive. Of course, these initiatives will require continued collaboration between private and public sectors. They will also require partnership with industry, Indigenous communities, and Canadians broadly to ensure we can keep momentum and achieve our bold ambitions. Last week, the Chamber hosted National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak of the Assembly of First Nations, and she spoke to the importance of partnership and conversation, especially around infrastructure and nation building. I mention this because major projects are a huge topic in Calgary right now, particularly with Don Farrell heading up the Major Projects Office. So we really have this intentional focus on nation-building projects and making sure all parties have a seat at the table. And this is relevant to many of the initiatives we're seeing in the budget, and I'm looking forward to diving into all of this and more during our conversation with the Minister. With that, I'm pleased to invite Jeff Lawson, I might be a little nervous, Executive Vice President of Corporate Development at Cenovus Energy, to come up and say a few words on behalf of our presenting sponsor. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Lawson.
Deb's anxious and I'm nervous. Even though it's a really friendly crowd, I'm nervous, but I'm excited. I'll go off topic just a little bit, off scripted notes. I want to thank the staff here. I came here and I didn't have a poppy. I was mortified because it had fallen off my coat. And they're all sold out everywhere. They're not restocked. So I went to the front desk and there's a wonderful lady named Tanya, and she pulled off her poppy and she gave me her poppy. So she saved me. Yes, thank you. I emailed my friend and I said, could you find me a poppy? And his suggestion was you should steal one from a veteran. I thought that maybe that wasn't the best. They don't move that fast. So I won't do that. So there's the man of the hour. So just so you know, there he is, because I'm going to talk to him a little bit. So I'm really excited to have Minister Champagne here today, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a personal thing first, just to set the groundwork. For country artists, my kids love Morgan Wallen, maybe not some of his behavior, but like the way he performs, they love it. So I'll just say that first and I'll go into this. So when I was asked if Cenovus would want to be supporting sponsor, of course you do, because then you get to speak. That's the benefit. You get to say what you want. I get to speak to the minister. It's terrific. So when we got asked, we jumped at the opportunity. And I jumped with the feeling it's like my kids, who don't ask me to do a lot, asked me to go to the Morgan Wallen concert with them. Like, absolutely, yes. And I will tell you why. So I did want to reflect on why I felt that way and what I want to convey to you folks here today. First, to my friends, my peers here in Alberta, I have some thoughts. Like, we all need to pull together to keep things moving, to drive things. We need to drive the Canadian economy. We need to drive the Alberta economy, but it's an obligation we all have to work together. To do that, we really need to support other industries, just not our industries. And we need, an awareness of where we're at, where those other industries are at, and all the conflicting things the finance minister has to contend with as we try to draw on him and his resources. So that's one thing. So to do that, we need to work closely alongside our governments to let them know, very respectfully, what challenges we have and where we can improve things, and we need to do that relentlessly. Next, Minister, I'm hoping you'll share your views today as to what you see as the state of the Canadian economy and how you see things go forward, and what the federal government would like to see our industries do, working alongside you to improve things. I've heard a lot of different narratives. So I've heard it's a growth budget, we're going to see a lot of improvement. I've heard that we're still struggling and slipping behind productivity from our peers. And then I think our manufacturing sectors right across the country, out east, out west, are struggling because of policies of the Trump administration. And those are things we need to deal with together. And that's where I say we need to support each other. So I think about energy where I work. So I'll tell you what I do. So I work at Cenovus Energy, large energy company. My portfolios are diverse, but part of them are parts corporate development and parts government relations. And aside from operations, I'd say those are two of the most important things. I'm very biased when I say those are two of the most important things. So corporate development, we're buying and selling things that change our business. But government relations, government policy is what's going to drive growth in this country. And it's so incredibly important to all of us, the way the government sets the tone on how we'll go forward. And I do want to say one thing, and I want to say this first, and I forgot. I want to go off script and say, so this week we'll buy a company called Meg Energy. It's 110,000 barrels a day. Cenovus will become larger because of it. There are about 470 really good people at that company. It was founded here 20 plus years ago. Incredible company, incredible people. So I want to thank them for their work and for joining our company. And with that combination, we will accelerate production growth in the province and in this country. And we're doing it because we're just a larger entity and we can accelerate things and we'll add to our economy. And we're very proud of that and proud of the people that are coming over there from us, to us. So the energy industry, with room to responsibly grow, is one of the few industries that can actually move the dial in the country for the economy. So we can drive GDP growth, we can support manufacturing sectors across the country, but one thing we need to do is work closely with the federal government on any impediments to growth and make sure we're aligned just in talking about them and trying to tackle them together. So one example I use, we use a lot in the West, and but it's across the country, different industries. There's a burden with the industrial carbon tax. We think it's a boat anchor on accelerated development. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. It's an anchor, and it's something we need to respectfully sit down with our government on and talk about. There are things we might need to change if you want accelerated growth. This is one of those things we need to talk about. So, Minister, I want to thank you for a lot of things. I want to thank you for making the effort to come out to visit, literally just days after the budget was set. You and your government have made really significant strides in consulting people across the country, east, west, energy sector, services sector, on what matters to us and informing key decisions you'll make as you run this country, and we appreciate that effort. I also wanted to share some things. I always like to know when people are talking behind my back. So, Minister, do you want to know what people say behind your back? I'll share something. This is true. So I was speaking to a lot of people at the Chamber just a week ago who were organizing this event. And I think last time you were here, it was International Women's Day. And they were really excited, like I was with my kids in Morgan Wallen, that you were coming back to visit. So I asked what they think about you, and they said you were the nicest speaker they have ever had here at any Chamber event. You are the nicest, maybe after Lois. You're second to Lois. And then I said, of course I said this, why is he the nicest? Why aren't I the nicest? Anyway, he is so nice to everyone, no matter where they sit in the pecking order, no matter what job they do. Last time he was here, he was so nice, he went back into the kitchen to thank the people for the meal. No one does that, and no one can fake that, but that's who he is. And I watched today, when he entered the room, we're having the reception, the first thing he did was went up to a lady working on the side of the room, serving, cleaning, whatever, and thanked her for her work. Very first thing he did. So, yeah. So the Chamber thinks we're very lucky to have you here. I think the same. I want to share just a few experiences I've had with you over the past 6 months. So a week ago, I was speaking to a bunch of young people at our company about leadership. And I said there are a few simple things they should know and a few simple things they can do to be better leaders. So I'll just speak to 3 things. So one, to be honest, being a leader is tough because your time is not your own. If you're a good leader, you're available for whenever an emergency arises. So we had one of those about 6 months ago at work, and I called him. So last spring, when Canada was hit with the tariffs, Canada countered with the counter tariffs. It's well-intentioned, some tension negotiations, but there were unintended consequences. So Cenovus and some of our partners, including Suncor and Murphy, were building a drilling topside in Texas, which is just really a massive multi-billion-dollar offshore drilling rig that we had to build there. And literally when the counter tariffs hit, we were moving it from the United States to Newfoundland on a ship. There's only one ship in the world that can transport it. And that's right when the counter tariffs hit. So our reading of the countermeasures, counter tariffs, is that we would get hit with with a $500 million bill to the Canadian government as we imported a drilling rig from the US to Canada. So we were stressed. I was terrified. Susan, our general counsel here, she was terrified. I sit across the hall from her. It was tough. It was a tough time. But as this emergency arose, Minister, you were immediately and personally available, and I want to thank you for that. So one thing we were worried about, oil and gas. I was worried that the government would love an extra tax on oil and gas and put that money in their coffers. Minister assured us that's not the case. The countermeasures were not meant to hurt Canadian companies. We would either find an exemption or we would find an immediate refund so it actually never hit our company. And he did all of that and his team personally in the span of 48 hours and relieved a lot of stress. The other thing, so two other things. So on leadership, a good leader shows up with energy. The energy you bring to a room really defines what's going to happen in that room as soon as you walk in. So, sir, you always show up with so much energy, you're almost vibrating. And my only comp is Rich Kruger on Suncor's quarterly con calls. And I only mean that as a true compliment to Rich, because it's amazing how much energy he has. The last one, third one I'd say is a good leader's inclusive. When a new kid enters a classroom or joins a team, it's pretty normal for people to want to keep their own comfortable group and not immediately invite that person in. However, what you recognize about real leaders, young and old, is that they go out of their way to invite someone in and make them feel at home. So just a few weeks ago, I was at the House of Commons visiting both sides of the House because that's what I should do. Before question period in the afternoon, I got to go behind the chamber in a private area reserved for the governing Liberal Party with the minister and his friends. It was mayhem. It was really busy. There were tons of people, and I didn't know a lot of them. So the first individual to spot me and walk across the room and warmly welcome me to the group was Minister Champagne. That set the tone for everyone else. If I was welcome with the minister, I was welcome with the whole group, and I had a terrific afternoon. So I want to thank you, sir, for making me feel so welcome and making me feel that I want to do the same when you visit our home here in Calgary. And with that, on behalf of all of us, welcome to our home. Thank you for being a good leader, a good partner, and a good person. And welcome.
Let me give him a hug, right?
Give him a hug. Absolutely.
I mean, listen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, on the East Coast, we're a bunch of huggers, so like, wow, what an introduction.
Wow. You got a lot to
I
live up
felt
to.
emotional, Jeff. I don't know. You have to warn me a bit in advance. I don't get to these introduction, but it's quite something. It's nice to be back.
It's great
but
to
you're
have you
supposed
here.
to do the interviews. I'm not supposed to start, so I'll
no,
wait for a minute.
The one thing a journalist hates is if somebody else takes the control of the interview. So guess what? It's not happening.
I've done one or two of these interviews.
Me too. I just want to remind everybody, we're taking questions from the floor, and I've got my phone. I'll just monitor my phone to make sure that I see the questions that come forward. And don't be shy. He's willing to answer anything. Ask me anything. So I'm going to ask you anything. So, we all watched the budget, and, you said, it was clear this is generational, it's transformational, it meets the moment, because it's a time for bold measures. Give us the greatest hits list on the budget that will help transform the economy.
First of all, can I just say, well, thank you everyone for being here. It's great. I'm sure you saw champagne on the menu somewhere to gather 300 people or 400 on a Monday afternoon. I'm really impressed. The Calgary Chamber is always a great place to be, I must say. I would have come even last week, but there was something called votes, which we still need to gather. And it's always good when you're the finance minister to be there for the vote. But to start out west, to start in Calgary, to start in Alberta, for me was, essential. As much as it was important for me to have my own shoes made or make my own shoes for the budget, I think it sends something, because when I think about building, about ambition, about building a country, Alberta and certainly Calgary and out west, you know how to do big things. And for me, it was a pleasure. And I want to say Corey is with me. Corey Hogan, which is our super. So why don't you stand up? I'll give you a round of applause. You're the MP here. So thank you, my friend. And just to give you something, Jeff made me reminded about these famous shoes. Believe it or not, you know, the first thing in politics, humility. And I walk in Pearson, I go to the bathroom, believe it or not, and the person who's cleaning said, "Oh, you're the finance minister with the shoes, right?" And I said, "Really? Yes, indeed. I am." I think it sticks to about, you know, what we are as a nation. And certainly, well, that budget for me was really an investment budget. When people said, how do you want to be seen, how do you want that to see, was really a sea change in how we do things in the country. I mean, you know, we have the opportunity to preside the G7, so forgive me to always compare, but in absolute terms, you can look at things, but in relative terms, you look, you know, so there's a bit of headwind. There's headwind around the world. I often say the speed, scope, and scale of what's happening is tremendous. You know, it's the tariff, but it's also geopolitics, it's alliances, it's technology. Yeah. I mean, there are so many things, AI, quantum, cyber, the whole world is going. And you know, initially I was looking, I said 1945, some said the fall of the Berlin Wall, but you're looking at a world which is vastly different than what we have lived through, many of us. I mean, at least in our lifetime. I don't think you see, I mean, you may have seen, even in the budget, we put a chart called the Uncertainty Index that I don't create, but I think the International Monetary Fund create. If you look at the world today, it's more than during the financial crisis. Yeah. So we're in a place where, you know, people have to remind themselves what we're facing and the speed and the change and volatility and uncertainty. Even at the, we preside the G7 this year, and I kept saying in Washington, we cannot let uncertainty become the new certainty, because that's really hurtful for business, for families, for workers. So if you look at that, you say, okay, but who has the fiscal capacity to act? And then, again, you know, when we're in Washington, the International Monetary Fund said there's really two countries in the world who can really afford to really make these step change in their economy. It's Germany and Canada. These are the two countries in the world who can really do that because they have the fiscal capacity, they have the wherewithal, and I can come to everything else that we have in Canada. Then you say, if you have the fiscal capacity, you need to make generational investments. You know, what we've done in housing, which is much needed, because that's also affordability. Because you have to think, you know, people are concerned about the end of the week, the end of the month, but at the same time want you to have a vision for the future. Then you're looking at infrastructure. Then you're looking at what we needed to do to protect our sovereignty on the military side. And then productivity and competitiveness, because that has been the challenge of multiple decades. And by the way, I want to acknowledge also the former lieutenant governors and the MLAs who are in the room. Lieutenant governors, I don't know where you are, but I saw you a few minutes ago.
Right there.
Oh, here you are.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for blessing us with your presence. But those are the kind of pillar, and when you have that, at the same time you said, I need to invest. If you want to be credible, you need to put your house in order. Yeah. So the $60 billion of savings for me was essential, because that gives confidence, I hope, in Canadians that, yes, we can be ambitious in our investment, but we need to be rigorous in our spending, and balancing the operating spending in 3 years with revenues, I think, give that kind of confidence that when we're going to borrow 3 years from now, it's going to be for capital formation. And why, and I'll stop there, why it speaks for people here is because this has been almost the epicenter of capital investments for generation. I mean, Jeff, Cenovus, and all the others have said, this is where we've built big things. You know, we've built a number of things, and people understand when you talk about capital investment, because that's how you grow the economy, that's how you attract investment, and our vision is really to invest in the type of things which will have the largest multiple to ensure that we turn the boat, that, you know, we create that kind of prosperity that we're going to need, and meet the moment, because this is really, this is not the time for half measures. This is not the time to tinker on the margin. This is the time where, again, when you look at the state of the world, if you want to succeed in this new economy, you need to take big, bold steps. And, you know, for example, the Major Project Office, by the way, in Calgary, what a better message to Western Canada, to Alberta, and to the world that we mean business. You know, you put that in Calgary, you put Don Farrell there, everyone that I know in the world, and I've been in business, even in my time I presided the BEM Forum, people would say, this, we mean business. And now it's about us, doing big things together like we've done before. But we need to get that, back to doing big things together. And I hopefully, and certainly from my perspective, I think the budget will inspire these kind of investment. We said $1 trillion,
Yeah.
$450 billion on a cash basis over 5 years would generate $1 trillion. And just to finish, if you compare that with Germany, which is the largest economy in Europe and one of the largest in the world, at least in the G7, their plan is 500 billion euro over 12 years. Yeah. We're putting 450 billion over 5 years.
Natural gas from the States?
Well, I'll be telling you, I think mentalities are evolving. And some of you may know that I come from the East, from Quebec. And I would say the fact that the Prime Minister changed the tone to talk about an energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy, I think has really changed how people perceive these things. I think even people I would see at the grocery store, they understand today the nexus between economic security, energy security, and national security. I think the world has changed in the way that people see, in my view. There's things that we're saying today that would have been very difficult 6 months ago or 9 months ago. People would have seen the world probably, and I think people understand you can do that sustainably, responsibly. Canada is a great brand around the world, and we have the technology, we have the people, we have the wherewithal. So I think that there's more openness to energy corridor than before. I think people understand that the natural resources sector has been key to our national prosperity, to investment in the country, to be who we are as Canadian in many ways. And therefore, that's why I think that with the major project office, the fact that we have now professionals which are looking at that, the fact that the government has put what we have. If you look at the different crown corporations, we have about 40 billion that we can deploy to support. I think it puts us in a very good place to look at the things that, and I would say that our allies are very much looking at Canada. Whether you talk about Germany, whether you talk about Japan, whether you talk about South Korea, because for them, energy is national security. But we need to get our act together. We need to be doing more. And things like, just to give you a small thing, but when you say one project, one assessment, that has been a long time where we said things like that. Now, to your point, we need to operationalize, we need to work, but in my perspective, at least in my opinion, mentalities are changing, which are going to be, I think people are ready to do things today differently than we did before.
So, we've had that conversation about how important it is for us to monetize our energy resources, especially. And from an LNG standpoint, how do you see that really moving forward in a expeditious way? For the longest time, the previous government was saying that there was no business case for LNG. So now we have a different view.
With LNG Phase 2, I think we're going to be the second largest in that kind of facility. I was talking to the CEO of Shell, which I've known for many years. I mean, LNG Phase 2 is changing. It's a game changer also for Canada. Cedar LNG, wood fiber. I mean, now I think people see that we can play a key role in the Indo-Pacific. If you want to be at the big table, you have to talk about energy. So it's about food security. It's about energy security. You go in Japan, I mean, don't remember by heart, but something like 80% of fuel is imported and 60% of food or thereabouts. So when you come and you say, we can help you in terms of food security, we can help you in terms of energy security, I think it's matching the demand with what we can offer. But I would say we're pushing an open door because Canada is seen more and more as a predictable and stable partner. But to your point, now people say, okay, but you need to step up. You need to get, these products to market, and you need to do it fast because we need it. And the geopolitics has changed. I mean, some people said, yeah, you were there before. Fair point. But I would say the world has changed significantly in 9 months. I mean, who could have predicted we would be where we are today? I mean, if you could, I'm sure you should be in the trading market because the kind of change we're seeing, and we might continue to see, That's why, for me, this is almost like a wake-up call to the nation to say, we need to get our things in order. We're a strong country, one Canadian economy, get our projects done, and export more. You know, this whole export corridor. Think about critical minerals. I mean, we're probably the country today which is the most attractive for critical mineral. If you look at, you know, the first and last mile fund we did, now we're going to have one for sovereign critical minerals. We're really at par. And $1 invested today in Canada, from a tax perspective, gives you more than $1 invested in the U.S. So our tax competitiveness, now we're not only compared to the U.S., but today if you make an investment in Canada, it's more tax competitive than any G7 country.
So I wanted to ask you about that, because I think we're 2% or 3% of global capital markets. So in order to attract capital to do some of the things that you have in the budget, and you know that $1 trillion in investment, we need to attract foreign capital. We haven't done a really good job of that because of some of the regulatory challenges in the last while. So I guess the question is, was that the motivating factor in terms of decreasing the marginal effective tax rate to the lowest in the G7? Was that the reason, because we needed to get attract more capital to Canada and also help us build what you think is really important?
Well, it speaks to people. Obviously, if you're in the street, people would be probably thinking more about affordability measures. But that's why I say, well, you need to think about affordability, but at the same thing, competitiveness. But if you talk to CFO and CEOs around the world, which we do a fair bit with the Prime Minister, when you say that the marginal effective tax rate in Canada is the lowest in the G7, that speaks to people. Yeah. You know, if you have to allocate capital, and you hear most of the people here who are leaders where you can allocate between Canada and the United States first and then beyond. But to say that we're going to be at 13.6, I mean, if there's one message I want to get into the FT, it's going to be, and we're going to on the road, the Prime Minister and I, we're pretty good at selling, you know, and I think we need to brag about Canada. It's about time we start bragging about Canada. And when you compare the rest and what we've done now, and you look at the marginal effective tax rate, you look at the tax credit for critical minerals, we're looking about the major project office. And to your point, when I talk to some of the largest investors in the Middle East and Singapore and others we've talked to, part of the challenge is that they obviously want to invest in Canada, but they were not really aware of the projects we had. You know, they needed a pool.
There's also a narrative about the regulatory challenges.
Part of it. But trust me, they're very excited about Canada. Some of them told me they're underweight, and you should see the number of calls I get for people who want to put massive amount of money, because they said, you know, if you look at the world, I remember being one. I was in the Middle East. He took a map and he said, if it was your money, look at the world today. Where would you put your money for return? And you start looking at different things. And obviously Canada, talk about mining, talk about natural resources, talk about large projects. But we need to do a better job first of, you know, very few people wake up in the morning thinking about Canada and the world. Let's start with that, you know. Like I do, you do, but you know, you're in the rest of the world. Not everyone wakes up and say, oh my God, what's happening in Canada today? You know, they think about something else. And then you have to bring it to them. And the large investment, I remember Dow Chemical, what I did with the Premier, when we called the CEO of Dow and we sat with him and we presented Canada, when we did the same thing with Heidelberg on cement here in the province, you have to bring that. But it's not just me, it's all of us. It's you, it's the chamber, it's all of us together who say, now that we have a clear path forward, now that we're, you know, making sure we attract these investments, it's going to go and say, we're going to do big projects. Capital is waiting to see projects in Canada. They want to come in North America. They look at 2 jurisdictions, and, you know, some of them would say it's good to be in a place where it's, you know, stability, predictability is really what defines us as Canada. But now we also will have a list of projects thanks to the major project office. So that's why when I said to folks when I was doing the speech, you know, we're going to be okay as a nation. There's a bit of headwind now, but you know, if we do everything we do and with you, because what the Prime Minister and I can do is the blueprint. We can put the regs, we can put, like you said, do better from our side, be more efficient, put the incentive in place. But then what's going to make the difference is all of us together to take that to the world and say we're going to, you know, we're going to do more, we're going to build more, we're going to export more. We're going to be on these markets where we can build our manufacturing base as well, rebuild it, and bring these investments that, Canada is known for. We have a huge industrial base. That's why I'm saying why I'm hopeful is when I sit again at the G7, there's very few countries which have an aerospace industry, very few countries which have a car industry, very few countries have a critical mining industry of the size of Canada. Very few of them have an oil and gas industry of the size that we have. You look at all that, and we're in a strong base. Now, it's kind of reaching our full potential, turbocharge this growth so that we can benefit and make sure that we can protect, what is true, because we were able to protect, programs that are vital to Canadian identity and help those who need, but at the same time having that vision of growth and ambition. If there's one job that I need to do is to, bring Canada to be more ambitious as a nation, that we say, yes, we're gonna face the moment, and when I look around, I think we have what we need to succeed.
I'm going to just challenge you on one thing.
Yep.
I think everybody was watching Canada during the baseball playoffs when the Blue Jays were
Yeah,
there.
well,
Maybe not so much now.
it's one
but they
thing.
were.
I'm not sure the budget could have helped on that, but
No. So a few questions have come in from the audience. How will the capital be deployed to the critical minerals sector through the Major Projects Office? What will the pace of fund allocation look like? What will the mechanisms, what mechanisms will be used? And I'm going to add one more. It's one thing to develop our critical minerals, but we have to be able to process them too, and we don't have enough of that capacity right now because we're beholden to China. So all of that, over
that's
to you.
music to my ear, Deborah. It seems you read my mind because, exploration, extraction is something, but what we need is refining.
Yep.
That's the key in a sense, And I come from a region where we used to cut log and send it south. I think we can do better. A few generations after my grandfather and great-great-grandfather, we can do better. Now, refining is the name of the game, especially when it comes to critical minerals. The good thing, Minister Hodgson, not just the G7 initiatives, for me, it's about matching the demand and the offer, and capital will come in between. We just need to have long-term purchasing agreement. We've expanded the list of critical minerals that would be covered because they are essential to that. How we're going to deploy that, I think, very strategically, for example, we have one refinery of cobalt in North America, which is in Canada. We have one for titanium, which is in Canada. And I remember being south reminding them that, national security, these things really matter because titanium are needed for submarine and some of the defense systems. So we've been mapping very smartly what kind of things we need to mine and extract, and refining how can we partner with the other G7 countries, because there's a number of initiatives going on. My goal is that if Canada could become the NATO partner of choice, because there's other countries who can provide critical minerals, but when I talk to CO proximity is everything. Yeah. Proximity to resources, market, and refinery. That's what you want. People can have it in other parts of the world, but in the world we live today, people don't want to take chance. Every CEO I talked to, he said, what I like about Canada? Remember, he said to me, I like you because if things go bad, I can truck it. If it goes so bad, I'll take my own pickup truck and go pick it up. And this is what Canada can offer in this, at least North American environment and the NATO environment where Canada can have a place of choice. Because the other thing we didn't talk is about defense. Everyone in the room, I've said that in every room I've been. Every company which sells a service or a product should think about having a defense strategy, because it goes from, people who would be in the digital economy to the people who would be in goods and even, traditional goods. Because now, if you look at what we're going to invest as a country, but if you take it again at the G7 level, you're talking multiple of trillions. This is, and for us, which we, because of the geolocation we have and the size of our military, we need to use that as an engine of growth to create jobs in Canada, to invest in research and development, to build the next generation of quantum. There's so much you can do when you're not like a country who projects power, in a sense that you don't need the same type of equipment. You need what you need to equip the armed forces, but we have a lot of discussion with Italy, with other countries who say, for us, we need to team up together to really use that, like our southern neighbor have been doing for decades, to use the defense industry as an engine for research and development, and making sure that we make in Canada, we build, we make in Canada, by Canadian and for Canadians. I mean, we just need to be our own best customers. And I think that's going to be transformational, but anyone should be thinking, especially now with the productivity super deduction. I mean, today I was meeting folks in the street. People stopped me in the street. And I said, well, if you're a small business with the productivity super deduction, you can expense 100% the equipment, the buildings, the technology you're going to be using, the R&D you're going to be doing, the automation you're going to bring. I mean, that is a game changer for a lot of people who were, with uncertainty thinking, should I do it now? But with immediate expensing of plant and equipment, this is really supercharging. It's funny because in the plane, I meet all sorts of people.
And I'm sure
the
you
guy
talk
next
to everybody.
To me, well, I mean, it's like it goes both ways. Trust me. People talk to me, I talk to them. It's sometimes half and half. But the person next to me said, Minister, since you announced that, he was in construction, and he said the phone has been ringing all weekend because now people want to do it now. They were waiting for projects, but now if you can expense 100% the first year, obviously from a cash flow perspective, that's what you need to turbocharge. And that's the kind of thing, and we're just starting. This is our first budget. There's going to be many more. But I think it gives a sense of where we stand and what we want to build in this country.
I just wanted to, in addition to the titanium and cobalt, we have the only copper smelter that that refines military grade copper. So that's something else to keep in mind. There's another question that's come in from the audience. Thank you for a strong pro-research and innovation budget and the $1.7 billion for international talent acquisition. How do you plan to position new chairs to attract researchers with history of successful startup or commercialization? And how can Canada ensure they can thrive and Canadian innovation stays in Canada? Because so often there's innovation that starts here, but it's made for a U.S. market and then it's gone. So what do we do?
Well, first of all, I think that's a game changer. $1.7 billion to attract the best and brightest in our country. Those are going to be the scientists, the researchers, the also a strategy on H1B1, those who may want to come to build what Canada can do. And to your point, innovation is really my productivity, competitiveness is certainly the main focus and the budget, but linked to that is innovation. How can we scale? How can we adopt? How can we build the next, the next Shopify, if you want? We need companies like that, and there's a lot in the oil and gas which are well established. But I'm saying, how do you build kind of these new companies, this unicorn, to say we need to have in this index? I was looking the countries which have companies which have that. It's either in pharmaceutical, it's either sometime it's in new technology, obviously. But there's a lot of where Canada will need to really focus on the innovation piece. I think reforming SHRED, you never know when people start doing, it's going to supercharge research and development, which is a good thing.
Right.
The other thing is that from there, how do we seize the moment? Because I think AI will be a game changer. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, as a general purpose technology, when you look at that, it's akin to electricity in the last century. It's almost difficult to fathom where, if you think the intersection, I was with, we were in Washington with, because we also have the financial crime unit, and we were with the FBI and some folks at Treasury. And when you think at the intersection of quantum, cyber, AI, and telecom, I mean, this is a whole field. And Canada was the first country in the world to have a national AI strategy and an AI quantum strategy. So how do we build on these foundations? Because innovation, I think AI is going to be a big engine, and it's going to apply. I'd like to give you an example in the oil and gas sector, which I talked to one of the CEO recently, Canadian, not based here, but very successful. And he was telling me, just in their contracting practices, he said they've put AI to conform contracts with invoices.
Right.
And he said, Minister, we're saving about 30% a year. And this is not even renegotiating contract. He said, if you have an old rig, it's just people conforming, you have like probably tens of thousands of vendors and the invoices. It's just matching the terms and conditions of the contract. You would love that as the general counsel. But I'll have that system. I can show it to you. I'm getting it for the federal government. So that you can have the terms which match the invoice. And there's a bot in between. And it's just, he said, It's not even improving the contract. It's just making sure that we pay what we are, what we owe to the vendors. So I think there's a lot that this is going to help us to. Technology is going to be our friend. We're going to adopt it in the federal government. But and what I hope this budget does also is to inspire also the provinces and municipalities, and obviously the private sector, because when we say that our investment will enable $1 trillion, because if you build this new mine, the province will do something, the municipality will do something, obviously the private sector will be key. But I think this is going to be a big catalyst for investment, because I think the tone is set so that, and I'll have the chance to speak to your premier just after the event.
It'll be a catalyst for increased energy consumption too, right?
Yep.
That's the other side of it. So, one thing you just talk about being more productive and how important that is. Canadian companies have not invested enough in machinery and equipment. In the last 10 years, we've fallen 13% compared with an increase in the U.S. of 27%. So that's affected productivity. There's also other issues that have sort of prevented the investment in machinery and equipment, like regulations, lower dollar, and more capital going to home building rather than major projects. Do you think this budget is going to sort of get us back on a trajectory to increase productivity?
Well, certainly. I mean, you see productivity, competitiveness. If you look at the 4 pillars, this is one of the key pillars that we've put in place to make sure that we change the trajectory, because that trajectory was going, for decades. I mean, I look at people in the room. We've been talking about productivity in this country I'm 55, I don't know, since I can read. So, you say, but the challenge is the policies, but how do you entice the private sector to invest and in more machinery, more equipment, automation, robotization? I mean, you just need to make sure we do that. Now you look, what can we do from fiscal policy and tax policy? I think the answer is in the budget. Immediate expensing is going to be, in my view, supercharging that, because now you have a clear incentive to do that. Even more competitive when you look on a tax basis for investment than if you do that in the U.S., combined with, the major projects that are going in the country, which are going to lift our supply chain. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. You look in the construction sector, what we're doing in housing. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. I just, the budget is really to kickstart that, but it's not really the person on the stage. It's all of us in the room, because the people who are going to make it happen are the people in the room, people who are going to seize that and say, okay, this is the time, and convince also their headquarters for companies who may not be headquartered here, and say, Canada has changed its direction in a way that should entice more investment in the country. And these policy, I think, that we've put in place, we're going to make us also an innovation hub. But if you ask me, is there more work to do? Definitely. I think we have done a course correction now. I think people have found a new confidence that this is a serious government that want to do serious thing, that is serious about growth and investment. And if you look at the markets have reacted positively to the budget, and we're going to be talking to a number of investors around the world, and already I saw some of the CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world texting me and say, amazing that they read the Canadian budget. I'll probably send them a copy signed, but that they're focusing on Canada. But I think it's gonna change this country for. We have done a course correction now.
So, having conversations with energy leaders over the years and understanding the challenges that some who are subsidiaries of international companies, the narrative has been that whenever capital goes to where it can get the best return. And many times they have tried to advocate for investing in Canada, and that has not been something that has been well received, and the money hasn't come here. So what's the time, just because you've tabled this budget with all the initiatives that you've put forward, how long do you think what else do you need to do to encourage the Canadian sub of a U.S. or an international company to say, yeah, you know what, we can stand up now and we can stay coming out, attract capital, because that has, from a risk standpoint, we haven't been there.
Well, we need to bring our story to the world. I mean, it's all good that all of us know it. And then, I mean, my best ally and ambassadors are in the room because you interact with people. We've done a number of things. We're going to be, the Prime Minister and I, quite active. You're going to see us on the, to go talk to investors and really make the case for Canada of what we, where we want to bring the country forward. But we've done things I can remember. I'll give you the example, very concrete for Alberta, when Dow Chemical made their investment, when Jim...
But that's on hold now.
Yeah, but it's not because of Canada, it's because of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things which are Canada, there's things that Canada is no different than the challenge of growth in the world, which is revised because of a number of things. But I just want to say, the example of the Premier and I, we met, I invited the board, we sat with the board, we invited them, we made the case. I mean, there's so much for us to bring our story because oftentimes we would think as Canadians that people around the world know about the good things we do here. But my message to you, we're going to be your ally. I've always said if you have the board of your corporation which is coming in Canada, I've attended I don't know how many board dinner to make the case for Canada, to answer questions for board members, to really make the case and say what can we do. You'd be surprised how many people have my cell phone around the world and would text directly and say, okay, what about this, what about that? And we should all do that together because there's so much that we can do. But I think we have a solid story. Again, remember, compared to the other countries in the world, I always go back to the G7. You compare us with the G7, trust me, at the table, most of my colleagues say, I'd like to present the budget you're presenting, but I'm not in that position. Right. If you look at the fiscal capacity in many of our peers, they're nowhere close to what we can do, not even close to. And they don't have the natural resources. They don't have necessarily the industries we have. They don't necessarily have the critical minerals. They don't necessarily have the access to the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic and the Arctic. I mean, we have a lot for us to go, but I think that's what we needed is kind of supercharge and realize what we have in a very complex world, let's be honest, because the headwind is facing Canada, but just look around the world, it's facing, every country in the world is subject to tariffs now. Yeah. So, and for us, we have our own arrangement with our southern partner, but so all of that is changing supply chain. It's even changing maritime routes. I was with some of the largest logistics chain, and you're saying because of some of the new arrangements they're putting in different countries, their shipping lanes are changing now. Yeah. And they say Canada becomes very attractive now with that. And if we can debottleneck, we have a lot of things to debottleneck. I talk to CPKC, Keith, quite often, to the CEO of CN as well. How can we debottleneck? Because our trade corridor needs to be more fluid. Yeah, and we need port infrastructure. We need to double down on that. But we are able, we've done the St. Lawrence Seaway, we've done the railway. That was a long time ago. Now, I know, but that's the kind of thing that I just wish we would do more of the St. Lawrence Seaway. Okay. I'm ready to go dig, trust me.
Excellent. There's a question about, can you speak to the funding opportunities for Indigenous people and communities, particularly around infrastructure developments and education?
Yes, we made the choice to protect the progress that we've made on reconciliation. Indigenous peoples are part of the fabric of Canada. And it was important, certainly for me and the Prime Minister, to safeguard the key programs which deliver services to Indigenous peoples across the country. I believe very much in economic reconciliation. I think there's a lot of opportunities to build this country together. I think the Indigenous Loan Guarantee, for example, is one of the instruments that is a game changer. That's why we doubled the amount, making sure that First Nation communities across the nation can have the tools to become full partner in projects, which I think is a great thing. So we're going to be working hand in hand. I think this is, when I think about the different programs that we've been able to put in place, there's still a lot of infrastructure, wastewater. I mean, there's a lot to be done. We realize it, and I think...
Connectivity as well.
Connectivity, I mean, and one of the things I would say also, everything we've done, think about the Arctic fund we put in infrastructure. That's going to benefit a lot of community as well, because we need to be smart. if we're going to build forward advanced spaces or runways or ports, we need to make that as much dual assets as possible. You know, this for me is a budget that speaks to the North and many northern communities, because a lot of these things, and again, when you compare to other countries, we are somewhat different than them, because if you're in Europe, it's mostly built. For us, the North is to be built in many ways. You know, if you think about runways, and one of the things I'm very happy that we were able to negotiate, or at least that I learned from Inuit communities and First Nation communities, was about how can we deliver better health services? How do we redefine that model? Even potentially involving the armed forces. You know, if we're going to have a base, we should have a clinic. I mean, there's a lot of things we just need to do. For me, oftentimes, it's just doing things a bit in a much smarter way. If we're going to deploy that amount of money in parts of the country, and I think for the North, this is going to help to build a lot of infrastructure that, you know, with infrastructure comes a community, with community comes you know, a local economy. Same thing with mines that are going to be built. And I think small modular reactor, when you're going to be able to bring power to the mine as opposed to the reverse and having long transmission and distribution line, I think we, you know, we're going to be the first country in the world with a commercial small modular reactor in commercial operation in Darlington. I mean, I can tell you that's the kind of thing that people ask me all the time. They said, you're going to be the first one? Because if we, and we will succeed, that people would like to see that, then it's a huge potential to develop resources that today would be, you know, would take too much time or would be too costly to bring the power to the facility.
So this budget really is a macro budget, and the world lives on a micro level. How do you square the circle so people understand that the macro initiatives that have been announced affect everybody in this room and everybody on the street?
You're spot on. I'm always reminded, you know, it's been tough for families. It's been tough for many families, for workers, for many communities in the country. I mean, like I said, this new tariff world is impacting you differently if you're an auto worker in Oshawa, Windsor, or if you're in the steel industry, lumber, canola. Folks in my hometown, which, you know, are in the lumber industry, they said, yeah, you know, maybe 85% of the goods are tariff-free, but not mine. Yeah. So it brings it very much home. So I think we tried to have the right balance between the affordability agenda, which is the agenda everywhere you go. And this is like the end of the month, the end of the week. People say, give me a break, help me. And that's why the tax cut, which, you know, was an investment. Because for me, the best affordability measure is to leave more money in the pocket of people. That's the starting point. You said you leave more of that money in your pocket so you can do what you want to do best. Then housing is a big part of that, because affordable housing, if you spend more than what you should on housing, well, it eats up the rest. So housing is foundational to your affordability in your life wherever you are. So on one end, you need to do things like that to make sure that we bring people along. And that's why I say when people look at the deficit, I said 75% of it was sovereignty and affordability. Sovereignty to respond to the tariff, right? Because people, I'm sure this is part of our Canadian value. If workers are impacted, we will be shoulder to shoulder with them. We're going to have their back. You know, this is the Canadian way. We're going to help them transition, pivot these plans to other things. And the other thing was really around the tax cut, because those were the two things. That's why I say 75% of what people saw. And we wanted to be very open and transparent to people. Same thing when we did the capital versus expenses. Right. It was about time. And actually, even the International Monetary Fund said the G7 should adopt the same thing. Yeah. Now they said...
Fitch wasn't so excited, but S&P were okay.
Well, listen, it's good, but the International Monetary Fund is a pretty big voice when they say that countries should look at the way Canada did it, because that's really what they would suggest G7 countries to adopt. It's a pretty... You know, it's a pretty big mark of approval when you have them saying, you know, the way they did it is really the way they'd like to present it. Because you know what? It speaks to people. People in the room understand what capital is about. You know, you go to the grocery, you spend, you buy a house, you invest. I mean, for a government, you say, this is the operating expenses. It's very clear. You can see it. And this is the capital investment, when we're going to do these projects, when we're going to build these bridges, these runways. And I think it gives a better, more transparency to people so they can judge us and decide if we have made the smart choice they expect us to make.
Speaking of investment, capital investment, Calgary's been in the news in recent years because of its record investments in arts and culture and new events district, with limited participation from the federal government. Is there room in this budget for the federal government to align with other public and private investors in supporting these municipal priorities?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to protect our identity as well.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about the economy, and for sure, I guess if you invited me, you want to talk a bit about that. But, you know, protecting our identity, our sovereignty, we are as a nation, and I think that's very important because it's something to talk about the economy, but you want to be true to Canadian values. And that's why people want, you know, I said we have what the world wants and increasingly needs. I think our values speaks for a lot in the world when you say you're Canadian and the Canadian values. So to your point on heart and culture,
and Calgary arts and culture.
Calgary arts and culture. Well, we've put a fund which is in there is a what we call Build Community Strong, which there's a stream there that will allow to support local projects because we understand, and you know it's all fine if you go and you say we're going to build this mine or this, but if you go back to your mom or your sister or some, I mean, people want to say, okay, me or my community, and I think these small projects speak to people about, yes, they want to build this great country, but you know it comes back also to the community. So we put a stream understanding that Canadians are going to be with us to do the big things, but they want also to see dividend locally in a sense. What about these? And you saw there's a list of projects we have already identified, and this was just a, how can I say, a microcosm because you cannot list all the projects in the budget, although my colleagues would love that. But I restricted it to one page.
How many pages?
Well, I restricted it to one page. But it gives a sense of the kind of things we could do, and that for me seems to be not having the specific, but the fund is made to support local initiatives like that.
So just a final question. Build Canada Homes program and infrastructure projects, there was money allocated in the budget for that to boost supply. What specific metrics and timelines is the government using to measure the success of these programs in increasing housing affordability? And transit also goes alongside that. You can have an affordable house, but if you can't get to work, it doesn't matter. Well,
public transit is a big thing. That's why what the province have been asking me was to help them on infrastructure. Infrastructure, I mean, I do these, what we call federal, provincial, territorial calls on a regular basis. And Nate, the finance minister of Alberta, has always been a great partner, I must say. The first ask of the municipalities was to provide them support and infrastructure, understanding that for many of them, it's somehow, in some places at least, exceed their capacity in many ways because there's much to build. We tried to respond with that with $51 billion over 5 years. Part of that is also for health infrastructure because we understand there's a lot to be done with hospitals and clinics to refurbish, you know, to put that to standard. I think it's an issue across the nation. To your point on that, Build Canada Homes, I mean, there's a lot of ambition. This is about affordable housing. This is that piece of the market which is around affordable housing. We have benchmarked with what is needed in terms of how many more homes we need in the country. They're just getting started, but I have confidence that with the help of the private sector, because this is not to replace the private sector, this is to crowd in more investment. And I think that's, if there's one thing, well, I mean, there's more than one thing I hope you might remember from today. But this is how can we crowd in private sector investment in the economy. You know, the government can never replace.
As opposed to crowding it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, I come from them, and you know, the Prime Minister, both of us come from a similar place. We understand that whatever we do is to crowd in investment and then let, you know, investors select the project and create the growth that we see and enabling that. But I think we're on the right track.
Just reminded me of one more thing. I mean, we live in this world of economic nationalism around the world. Some people call it economic coercion because governments are getting involved in the economy in ways that we haven't seen before. What do you think the government of Canada will do in this context? How do you see the government responding in terms of supporting projects, de-risking, crowding in as opposed to crowding out? It kind of goes.
I am happy with that. You know, I mean, some people have said over the last 10 years, you know, governments have become more active. To be honest, when I compare Canada, I'd say we've been pretty much on the back end of it. I mean, if you look at some of our colleagues, their procurement has been national for a long time. And I don't want to give examples, but they come to mind very easily. So for us to buy a bit more Canadian is not, you know, you don't need to be the Boy Scout in the room. You know, the world has changed. We need to buy Canadian. We need to favor Canadian entrepreneurs. Yes, obviously, we're going to respect this, you know, in many ways, the agreements that we have in place, but we have to understand the world has changed. And you're right, economic nationalism started, I would say, even not too far from where we sit, in a big way. And so you need to respond. So I'm not an island in the Pacific. I have to adjust to the reality of the world. And I think for us to enable, I think the way we've put now the fiscal policy and the tax incentive allows everyone in the room to choose in which industry they would. Can the government support and intervene to support particular project? I think, you know, it is smart. And I go back to the fact that today, in my at least opinion, there is a closer nexus between economic security and national security. Look at critical minerals. You cannot just let necessarily that to the market. I mean, this is becoming a decisive, I would say, product for the competitiveness of nation in terms of production. I mean, if we let it entirely to the market, I'm not sure we would meet the moment. So we need to step back and say, okay, how can we make sure that we would be there alongside the private sector to make sure that we get to market, that we protect some of these. You know, I used to manage what we call the Invest in Canada Act to protect. I put national security as part of the criteria. You need to engage eyes wide open. This is a different world. Yeah. You're sitting on something that countries would define their prosperity or even their manufacturing. One Monday afternoon together. It was a real pleasure.
Good afternoon. But I am not going to go right to my prepared remarks because there's a couple of things that I think we need to straighten out. But first and foremost, Deb and Ruhi, thank you to your team for filling a room on a Monday, which is arguably a holiday, to hear Minister Champagne. Amazing work that you do for our community, so thank you very much. I just think there should be some clarity that I am not the friend Jeff Lawson called about finding a poppy for him. Jeff has many, many friends. I was not the one he called. Minister, there was one question from the audience that was passed to me. It's a bit of a softball, or should we say a soft...
Take them when they come.
Yes, or should we say a soft football. Please ask him who he is cheering for at the Grey Cup.
Oh, I'm not going to go there. I have to go across the country after.
I think it was a very politically motivated question. Good afternoon. Look, it's a pleasure to be here today to offer remarks on behalf of Pathways Alliance. We're proud to have sponsored today's events. As many of you know, Pathways Alliance is made up of Canada's largest oil sands companies who are working together to provide the energy the world needs while advancing environmental innovation, including our proposed foundational carbon capture and storage project. I'd like to start by thanking Minister Champagne for coming to Calgary today and sharing his thoughts on the federal budget. It's no small undertaking to deliver a budget of this scope and scale, and it represents a shift in how we need to think and work together as Canadians. What resonated for me today is the urgent need to invest in our abundant natural resources to supercharge growth and unlock value for all Canadians. That is the inherent promise in this budget. The oil sands industry has an important role to play in this promise, with our goal of addressing our emissions intensity while ensuring we have the policies and market access needed to remain globally competitive and stimulate growth. We know there's much work to be done to ensure Canadians receive the full benefit of our resource sector. We look forward to working with you, Minister Champagne, and your provincial counterparts to ensure that Canada has clear, competitive, and durable policies to deliver on that promise to Canadians. On that note, I want to thank you, Minister Champagne, for joining Calgary's business community today and sharing more about Budget 2025 with all of us. It is my sincere hope that this budget is the catalyst for growth, for attracting and putting more capital to work in our country, so that we can ensure that our country and economy continues to thrive and allows us to continue to brag about the great country we live in. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, sir. What a pleasure. Are you standing up?
I'm gonna sit.
Oh,
You
okay.
can sit. Yeah, it's easier that way. Thank you, Derek, for your thanking remarks and for your support of the event. And thank you again, Minister Champagne, for joining us today. And thank you to all of you for joining us and filling the room, especially between a weekend and a stat holiday. I also want to thank, again, our sponsors for the support of today's event, our presenting sponsor, Cenovus, our thanking sponsor, Pathways Alliance, and our supporting sponsors, CAP, Imperial Oil, National Bank. I actually thought we'd get more carbon capture questions, but nobody asked them.
So I'm still here.
I also want to thank the Hyatt and the staff for their hospitality today. You've done a wonderful job making us all feel welcome. And of course, to our chamber staff for putting together this incredible event on what really was going to be a long weekend. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. And so let's give everyone a round of applause.
Thank you.
And just as we close today's event, I want to highlight a few things that we have coming up and just talk briefly about our Chamber's Movember initiative. You may have seen some of our chamber staff walking around with some sad-looking mustaches, and there might be a few sad-looking mustaches in this room as well. November is Men's Health Awareness Month, with the annual Movember campaign raising awareness and funds for men's physical and mental health issues, including prostate and testicular cancer and suicide prevention. And if your company isn't holding a Movember campaign, you can join the Chamber's Movember campaign. Just look for one of our chamber staff with a bad mustache by going to or by going to our website, calgarychamber.com, and clicking on the link. It's an important initiative, and our goal this year is to raise $10,000. So please consider joining us or making sure that you have a campaign internally. Just aside from that, we have a few more events coming up. On the 13th of November, we have our Transportation and Logistics Forum. On the 17th of November, we're hosting our Mental Health Monday, this time supporting caregivers and an aging population. And finally, on the 18th, we're hosting our Business After Hours networking event at the Bow Valley College Esports Arena. And, sorry, there's one more. November 20th, join us for a keynote and fireside chat with Stephanie Vaillancourt, President of Atkins Realis Canada. Tickets are available on the website, and please make sure that you check out the rest of the events that we have scheduled through November and into December. And finally, we are a nonprofit, independent, nonpartisan, member-driven organization. And if you're not already a member of the Chamber, we'd love to have you join us. And just in time for sort of towards the end of November, we have our new member Movember initiative. Did I say November?
Well,
I
you
did.
said new member November.
Yeah, no, I
thought
meant
that was a
November.
pretty
So
good
it's our
marketing
new
thing.
member
New
November. It's a little
member
bit of
November.
it's a little confusing, but for the entire month of November, new members can choose a bonus perk on top of all the benefits and savings that come with membership, from newsletter ads to extra event credits and much more. So please speak to a member of our team on your way out for more information. Our doors are always open. Thank you for joining us today, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hear Minister Champagne talk about the federal budget.
Thank you,
Have a great
Deborah.
afternoon.
Great job.
Yeah.
Big round of applause for Deborah. Merci tout le monde. Thank you.